Hi, my name is Amanda Eads, and today I'm going to talk to you about the prosody of the Pennsylvania Dutch question.
Did
So
Bobby
what
post
is
the
the
schedule?
Pennsylvania Dutch question? Let's first listen to the speaker using this prosodic tune.
Did Bobby post the schedule?
Let's listen again.
Did Bobby post the schedule? Did Bobby post the
So
schedule?
this is a regional variant previously found in central and western Pennsylvania, and it has been reported to correspond with two pragmatic conditions.
Did Bobby
Because
post the
we have heard this
schedule?
variant in the wild around State College and the Penn State main campus, we naturally wondered if we could better understand its prosodic and pragmatic properties. Previous observations have been based on spontaneous speech, so we designed a controlled experiment to systematically elicit this non-mainstream intonational variant. Several studies have explored PA Dutch intonation over the years and described similar patterns, but none have provided a quantitative analysis. Therefore, this is one of our primary goals. Fasold and Huffines both characterize the pattern as a rising intonation to the tonic syllable, indicated by the first red arrow, and then followed by a final post-tonic fall, indicated by the second red arrow. Fasold further claims that the final fall drops below the intonational baseline of the utterance, which can be seen in this example. The line under the L% or low boundary tone is lower than any other point in the pitch contour. This token of you hangry is the only known published example of the PA Dutch question intonation in Toby coding. For those unfamiliar with the Toby intonational system, H star represents a high rise, L star plus H starts low and ends high, followed by the low boundary tone or L%. Kiesling described this intonational pattern as a fall rise fall in his article on the YouTube Yenzer social personas. So who else uses the Pennsylvania Dutch question? Huffines found this pattern in the English of German-English bilinguals in central PA. Fasold found this pattern used among his English-speaking family in central PA. Barbara Johnstone and Scott Kiesling also report on this pattern in the Pittsburghese in western Pennsylvania. As mentioned previously, we've heard this pattern in the wild around State College, otherwise known as Happy Valley, which you can see in the photo here. And while working at Penn State, I lived and heard it in Perry County, which is between State College and the areas noted in the Fasold and Huffines articles. This pattern is often heard in questions, but we've noticed it in declarative statements as well. For experimental control reasons, we focused on a particular question form. Another reason for focusing on question form is due to its greater representation in the previous literature, especially Lois Huffines' in-depth analysis from her 1986 paper, Intonation and Language Contact, Pennsylvania German English. Huffines spent most of the 1980s and 90s documenting the Pennsylvania German-speaking community in central PA, and this analysis remains the most in-depth to date. She described a rise-rise-fall and a final rise-fall pattern. In the final rise-fall pattern, she noted that the fall typically begins on the penultimate syllable. This is represented in the set of questions on the left. However, she also found cases where the final rise and fall were condensed into the last syllable, as seen in the set of questions on the right. Huffines' work concentrated on the German-English bilingual community in central PA, while others, like Barbara Johnstone, have investigated variation of monolingual English speakers in PA. Johnstone has found this intonation in the Pittsburgh area and even uses it personally. She describes it as being used when the speaker asks questions and already has an idea of what the answer is. In this lecture found on YouTube at the QR code below, she gives an example of someone walking by a neighbor painting their garage. The onlooker asks, "Are you painting your garage?" Or as a non-native user, "Are you painting your garage?" And the onlooker is expecting the neighbor to say yes. Another pragmatic context discussed in the literature is something we have called not at issue. Fasold 1980 gives an example pertaining to supper. When someone asks, "Is supper ready?" it could be interpreted as problematic, and the intonation may suggest if it isn't, then it should be. However, when using the PA Dutch intonation pattern and asking, "Is supper ready?" or "Is supper ready?" the speaker signals to the listener that their answer will not be problematic or at issue, and they are just curious as to when dinner will be ready. A fun fact is that this meal is often called chicken pot pie in our area. So given previous findings, we have hypotheses about the prosodic and pragmatic properties of the PA Dutch question intonation. Our primary question concerned whether we could elicit this pattern in an experimental paradigm. Therefore, we designed a controlled experiment to elicit the regional intonational variant and to test whether it is pragmatically conditioned. This basic graphic shows the experimental procedure. Participants listened and read a context. They were asked to produce a question, and then they answered a yes-no verification question to ensure that their pragmatic interpretation aligned with our intent. We had a native Central PA speaker record the context and verification statements so we could provide participants with auditory stimuli. Additionally, to facilitate comparison across sentences and conditions, all questions were 7 syllables. The final word in the question always had 2 syllables, as in the example from the beginning. Did Bobby post the schedule? In order to compare the prosody across conditions, we had to control the syntactic frame. This is something we can't do in analyses of spontaneous speech, and we can only test and verify pragmatic intent in this controlled way. We used a Latin square design in which we purposely didn't randomize pragmatic conditions. We kept each type within its own block because we wanted participants to get used to a particular pragmatic interpretation. We did randomize items within the blocks. Also note that we included genuine and at-issue contexts for contrast with our expected response and not-at-issue conditions. This enables us to draw valid comparisons between these variables.
Ralph went to a
Now
football
I'm going to
game and was
assimilate the
supposed to wear the
experiment
new
for you.
jersey his mother bought. His mother is wondering if he did, but doesn't want him to think she'll be mad if he forgot. She calls his wife and asks,
So participants can read and listen to the context. Then they are asked to produce the question as if they are in that context. In this case, as if they were Ralph's mother. They would say, did Ralph wear his new jersey?
it will be an issue for
Then
Ralph's mother if he did not wear the jersey, true or false.
they would answer the verification question based on their pragmatic interpretation. In this case, we would hope participants answer false, because the context should have signified it was not an issue and the mother was just curious if Ralph had remembered to wear the new jersey. Between blocks, we included picture transitions to gain info on local lexical inventory and to signal a change in pragmatic context. So this is commonly known as a drag cord in our area. Others may call it an electrical cord or a drop cord, extension cord, but in Central PA, you will hear drag cord. To give a little more information on our stimuli and experimental design, this table shows a genuine and expected response item. Note that the question and verification statement are the same for each item. The contexts are contrasted as well as the target responses for the verification. Because of this design, we feel confident in making comparisons across contexts. Also of note, the question was presented to the participants in either the genuine or expected response condition, but not both. This slide shows the other two contexts. Same as before, the question and verification question are held constant and the context was contrasted. To provide more details regarding data collection, we programmed the experiment in PsychoPy. For recordings, we used a wireless Shure lavalier microphone system plugged into a Marantz recorder. The experiment occurred in a quiet office space. The experimenter stayed in the room during the instructions and practice trials to make sure that the participant did not have questions. After the practice trials, the experimenter left the room and the participants sat by themselves navigating through the experiment. Our results include 36 Central PA natives, nearly equally balanced in sex with a mean age of 43 years. We ran 42 participants, however we excluded all trials where participant interpretation did not align with the pragmatic context. Because of this, tokens were excluded for many participants, and 4 participants were excluded entirely due to no matching contexts. We excluded another 2 participants due to audio issues, and this yielded 621 tokens. Our Latin square design ensures us that certain interpretations are not specific to a certain item, however, we have not looked at the effective list. The 621 tokens were impressionistically coded for the characteristic PA Dutch intonation. 69 tokens were identified as having the final fall. We used Prosody Pro to extract 10 equidistant F0 values from each of the 7 syllables and then conducted a smoothing spline ANOVA. The SS ANOVA allows us to compare the average fundamental frequency of our set of 69 PA Dutch tokens with the average fundamental frequency of a parallel set of 69 final rise tokens. The SS ANOVA provides an overall group average, and to investigate overall patterns of individual tokens, we Toby coded the set of 69 PA Dutch tokens. Because Toby is impressionistic, 2 coders coded each token and a third expert coder resolved any disagreements.
Did Bobby post the
Moving to
schedule?
the results, let's first listen again.
Did Bobby post the schedule?
This token was produced in an expected response context and is representative of what we are calling a 2-scoop pattern, with its 2 sets of rise and fall. The L star plus 8 pitch accent is often described as a scooped pitch accent. This could be reflective of Huffing's rise-rise-fall pattern or Kiesling's fall-rise-fall patterns.
Did Bobby post the
Also
schedule?
note, the final rise-fall is collapsed into the last syllable in this example.
Did Bobby post
And
the
finally
schedule?
note that the final fall drops below the baseline as mentioned by Fazol 1980. The baseline is indicated by the red line.
Did Gerald like the meatballs?
Here's a new example of this pattern, so let's listen.
Did Gerald like the meatballs?
Let's listen again.
Did Gerald like the meatballs?
Notice in this example there are 2 sets of rise and fall, like the previous. However, the last rise and fall is across the final noun phrase, as opposed to the final syllable. In contrast with the previous example, this represents the PA Dutch pattern, but the distribution of rise-fall across the syntactic structure demonstrates there is variation in this regional feature. Additionally, this token was produced in a genuine context, which suggests that the intonation pattern is not strictly associated with expected response.
Did Gerald like the
Again,
meatballs?
note that the final fall is below the intonational baseline.
Did Mommy fold
And
the
for
laundry?
comparison, here is a non-PA Dutch token that ends with a low boundary tone. So let's listen.
Did Mommy fold the laundry?
Let's listen one more time.
Did Mommy fold the laundry?
So this token was produced in an expected response condition, again highlighting there is variation in production, and PA Dutch intonation was not produced as a categorical phenomenon.
Did Dave finish
For
the
further
repairs?
comparison, here's the same speaker producing a token ending in a final rise. So let's listen.
Did Dave finish the repairs? Did Dave finish the repairs?
This was produced in an at-issue condition. So moving from a token by token comparison, let's look at the smoothing spine ANOVA. The PA Dutch final fall intonation pattern is in orange, and the final rise pattern is in blue. F0 is on the y-axis, and 10 equidistant time points per syllable are on the x-axis. Remember, each token was 7 syllables in length, so the vertical line at time point 10 represents the end of the first syllable and onset of the second. The 2 patterns are largely overlapping until the onset of the 4th syllable. The beginning of the last syllable, around time point 60, is where the 2 patterns diverge. So on average, the PA Dutch tokens pattern in terms of Huffing's, with the final rise-fall collapsing onto the last syllable, though we do not see that the final fall drops below baseline following Fazol. Let's take a finer look at the 69 individual PA Dutch tokens. The majority, 59%, of our tokens were elicited in the expected response condition. 16 tokens were elicited in the not at issue condition, comprising another 23% of our total. While these trends are in line with our hypotheses concerning the intonational and pragmatic interaction, you can also see that the PA Dutch pattern was produced in genuine and at issue contexts. There was quite a bit of variation within our small number of tokens. This variation is further represented here in this slide. This graph demonstrates Toby patterns produced more than once. Only 34 of our 69 tokens are represented here, meaning 35 tokens have unique combinations of pitch accents before the low boundary tone. There are 3 things I want to highlight from this slide. First, the Toby pattern at the top is what we're calling the 2-scoop pattern because of the L plus H star pitch accents. We are also including the previous example of did Bobby post the schedule within this 2-scoop designation, even though its first pitch accent is an L star plus H. So there were 9 2-scoop tokens in total, 8 represented here in the graph, and this occurred most in the expected response condition. The second thing I want to highlight is the 1-scoop pattern. This had the largest number of tokens, though they were split across all contexts. And lastly, these results suggest that the expected response condition is more likely to elicit this pattern than the not at issue condition, though we admit this is based on a small number of tokens. In summary, we have confirmed and expanded upon previous prosodic analyses. We found a general rise-fall pattern that often includes 1 or 2 scoops. This is in line with previous patterns mentioned by Huffines 1986 and Kiesling 2017. The smoothing spine ANOVA did not demonstrate that the final fall fell below the intonational baseline on average, though we did find individual tokens where this was the case. Our findings support previous claims that the PA Dutch intonation pattern is pragmatically conditioned and used for expected response and not at issue contexts, though our results provide stronger support for the expected response interpretation. And here's one last example of the pattern produced by a female speaker in a not at issue context.
Did Dave finish the repairs?
And one more time.
Did Dave finish the repairs? Did Dave finish the repairs?
Importantly, our findings prove it is possible to elicit this regional variant in a controlled paradigm, despite the unnaturalness of experimental settings. Our participants came to campus, to this building here that's near and dear to our hearts, in order to complete the experiment in one of our quiet lab spaces. We would also like to highlight that we conducted sociolinguistic interviews following the experiment. We feel that this was a fruitful combination for data collection. We have not yet analyzed the interview data, however, it opens the door to potential comparisons with the speaker's spontaneous productions. In terms of our most immediate future directions, we are conducting a perception experiment. We were able to use the data from our production experiment to create a more natural perception experiment, and we hope this will give further insight into our hypotheses concerning the pragmatic interpretations of this particular intonational pattern. We're currently in the process of collecting data from PA speakers, and we have already collected data from our control group of non-PA speakers using MTurk. One day, hopefully soon, we will begin analysis of our sociolinguistic interview data. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, you can contact myself or Francis at either of the emails below. And here is a look at our references.